Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Glossy Philosophy. My name is Jansen Binman. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up because today we are doing a book talk on Jane Austen's Emma. I'm just going to assume that most of you know a little bit about Jane Austen, but what you might not know about her is that she created a new way of writing a character's perspective in Emma, and she was either the first or one of the first authors to actually use this new technique. Now, what is this new technique? It does have a special name, but I'm just going to break it down for you. It's basically where you get to discover the world through a character's eyes, and things are a surprise to you as much as they are to the main character or to another character. And this is groundbreaking writing that she is doing, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Jane Austen was, if not the first, one of the first authors to implement this new writing style, because sometimes she does get a bad rap for her stories and them either being boring or just very on the feminine spectrum. But she did actually do some really great literary work on top of her actual stories, which I think now are very much appreciated. Another fun tidbit about Jane Austen relating to the story of Emma is that when she was writing it, she thought that nobody was going to love this character except for herself. Her actual quote is, "No one but me could love Emma." Now, let's get into a quick summary of the story and then kind of dive into the character of Emma and a few things that, if you've read the book or if you haven't read the book, things to pay attention to or just discuss amongst yourselves. So a quick synopsis of this story is that Emma has lost her mother almost after childbirth and has been raised by a governess. Now, at the time that the story starts, we know that the governess has just married someone else in the community, and so Emma is left to basically fend for herself. She does have a father who has lots of ailments that are either real or imagined, and she takes up matchmaking because she's a very smart, intelligent woman. She's also in the higher society, so she doesn't have to work for a living. She's kind of bored, so she takes up matchmaking because she did put her governess and the other member of the community together and thinks, wouldn't this be fun to bring so much love and joy into other people's lives? And hilarity ensues through the entire book, and then we finally get to see Emma, who is 21 at the beginning of the book. We kind of get to see her grow up through her own eyes and discover lots of things about her community and about herself. And that is the quick synopsis of Emma. So even if you haven't read this book, I'm sure you've seen one of the many movies with Gwyneth Paltrow or something from the BBC. It's a pretty well-known story. Perhaps you've even seen the movie Clueless, which is an adaptation of Emma, and it's very brilliantly done. I would definitely check it out after you read the book Emma and just see how many comparisons you can make between the two stories. But even if you haven't read this book yet, I think that you can follow along in this book talk. It's not one where there's going to be a ton of spoiler alerts. However, there will be a few. So a few things to draw your attention to is that at the very beginning of this story, not only do we find out that Emma's governess has married someone else, but we also find out that there's another young person in the community who has lost a mother and has been raised by somebody else. Throughout the entire book, we have this mirroring going on between Frank Churchill, who's been raised by his aunt and her family, and Emma, who's being raised kind of by herself and her ailing father. And just the differences between the two. Emma definitely, although she does live in the clouds in certain respects of life, is also very grounded because she did have her governess, and she also has Mr. Knightley and her sister for a little bit of time before she gets married. Frank Churchill seems like throughout the entire book, he's basically allowed to do whatever he wants. I don't know if Jane Austen was trying to draw a similarity or a mirroring between women and men at that specific time, or just how different being raised in different circumstances can really change how a person acts. There's a moment when Frank Churchill has come to visit his father and his new wife, who is Emma's governess, old governess, and decides that he has to ride quickly into town to get his hair cut and then come back. And Emma recognizes that that is just very foolish and just a waste of time and a waste of money, since he could have gotten his hair cut in town and there's nothing wrong with the hair cutter in town. So just her understanding that Frank Churchill is a little bit of a spoiled brat, basically, is a really interesting insight into Emma herself. Now, when I was reading some other book reviews of this book, it felt like a lot of people missed some of those things about Emma, some of those growth spurts of Emma, because a lot of people were very negative about the actual character of Emma, but I don't know if it's because I've seen the Gwyneth Paltrow and a few of the other versions of Emma, and I really like this character. I think she's really interesting. I love that Jane Austen, and I think this is the only time she does this, takes a female character out of a situation where she has to marry and puts her in a great societal situation where she doesn't have to. Emma says a few times throughout the book that she has no desire to get married because it makes you a fool, it makes you not able to do what you want to do. She has no inducement to marry because she can't get any higher in society unless she were to marry royalty itself, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen in Highbury. So I love that Jane Austen gave Emma the power, and a young woman the power, to say no to anyone and everyone that she wants to. However, she still maintains a little bit of that naivete for Emma, who makes a lot of mistakes. Nothing super major, although she does almost ruin Harriet Smith's life, but nothing that can't be solved. And I love that she has that power. She has that monetary power, and she also has the mental power. Jane Austen did not give us a situation where Emma is a brat. We don't really see that in her. We also don't see her as stupid. She's very smart, even though there are a few comments made by other characters, mostly Mr. Knightley, like she doesn't read enough, she's spoiled, but she's not too spoiled. Just everybody loves her, and therefore that makes her spoiled. He is definitely the person that grounds her, and I think that's why they finally end up getting together, because he's a good grounder where she is allowed to kind of do almost whatever she wants, but she always makes sure that she stays within reason. So I'm loving the power of the female in Emma, and it is a very heavy female cast as well, which is amazing. Actually, a lot of Jane Austen books are female heavy, which is great. We see people who don't have as much all the way to people that do have as much. Something else I did notice about Emma's character, though, is that she almost at times reminds me of Mr. Darcy's aunt, where she wants people to stay in their societal place. And the idea of having a farmer marry her friend Harriet Smith, who we don't know anything about except that she's allowed to be at this very nice boarding school, but nobody knows her parentage at the beginning of the book. She doesn't want that for her friend because she thinks her friend is a gentleman's daughter. I won't spoil that for you at the end, but we do find out more about Harriet Smith towards the end of the book. And it's interesting that where in Pride and Prejudice we really don't like Mr. Darcy's aunt, we are supposed to like Emma a little bit more, even though she makes some of those similar mistakes. Another almost mirroring going on in the story is Mr. Elton's wife. Now, Mr. Elton's wife is kind of the same way. She wants to be recognized, she wants to be loved, but it is her desperation for attention and love that makes us as the reader not like her as much. She says some things she shouldn't say, and she's always trying to push herself on other people, whereas Emma just has this natural vivacity, this natural friendliness that draws people to her. And it's interesting, just a few degrees one way or the other makes us as the reader and the other characters in the book react to people differently, even if they are kind of thinking in this similar sense. Another character that we have to talk about is Miss Bates. So Miss Bates, if you've seen any of the productions, is really a funny character. When you read her, she has pages of dialogue. And I was reading a book review of this where it said Miss Bates is beyond interesting because she's almost the fool in this story, where she's quite silly, she's not super wealthy, and she sees everything that's going on, and sometimes she understands what she's seeing and sometimes she doesn't. So that makes her someone that we should be paying attention to. But because Jane Austen has written such long dialogues for her, we as the reader often also just kind of brush her off. And yet if you go back and start to read and really listen to what Miss Bates is saying, you see that she knows a lot more of what's going on than a lot of the other characters. So I also love that Jane Austen kind of took some of those Shakespearean elements of a play, of a comedy, of a tragedy, and a drama and put them into Emma. The last character I want to talk about is Jane Fairfax. Jane Fairfax is always a very interesting character for me because going into this, I already knew the outcome. I already knew what Jane's life was going to be like at the end of the book. And so reading her and getting a little bit more information about her was really interesting. And in the movies, I never really understood why Emma didn't like Jane Fairfax, aside from the fact that maybe she was feeling a little jealous, even though Jane is not as high in society. She still draws people to her, but Jane Austen writes her as basically the perfect woman on the outside. She's very restrained. She always looks very good, but she never too showy. So I feel like Jane Fairfax was written to be on the outside the perfect woman. And as the story goes on, Jane's life starts to unravel a little bit and we get to know her a little bit more, as does Emma, and we start to like her a little bit more because she's not quite so standoffish. We find out that she does have a lot of faults. We find out that she's made a lot of mistakes along with Frank Churchill, and yet she's also done a really good job of standing up for herself, and it turns out that she is a super strong young woman who is madly in love with someone and yet has been able to hold in all of that in front of others because they couldn't share their love. So it's a little bit of Eleanor from Sense and Sensibility, and it's also a little bit more of Mansfield Park as well. And yet I love the unraveling that happens towards the end because she does become one of the most interesting characters once you've read through the story and know what happens at the end. The last thing I want to talk about is just kind of opening up a few questions for you to think about as you're reading. Did you feel like when Emma befriended Harriet Smith and creates all this chaos for her, is she actually being a friend, or is she just bored and looking for somebody to fill that gap in that her governess left when she got married? So that's question one. Question two, do you think that Mr. Knightley is the right choice for Emma? Because sometimes at the end of the book, I find myself wondering, is this the right choice? He's so black and white and she is so colorful. He seems to only see one way, and yet they definitely challenge each other in the best sense. But it is interesting to compare their relationship with her and Frank Churchill's relationship, where they both paint with all of the colors and they definitely get each other into trouble. So just something to think about. And then of course, if you saw any interesting mirroring going on between Emma and Frank Churchill or any of the other characters, I would love to know your thoughts on that as well. And that is Emma Book Talk. Thank you guys so much for watching this book talk. Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors. She is right up there with Shakespeare. I love that she writes about women no matter what class they're in and their struggles and how they deal with it, and just how their emotions and their stories are still relevant to today. I think it's brilliant, and I'm so glad that she is still being read today and performed today in movies and plays and everywhere. I do fashion videos every Wednesday, beauty videos every Friday. Make sure that you are watching me on Instagram and the shorts in between the longer videos. There's more tips and behind the scenes to make your life a little bit easier and a little bit more glossy. And I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye.